Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!
Hello friends, I'm back with a video that I've wanted to update for a while, my best abilities recommendations. The last time I did this guide was back in June 2024, and while it was popular, a lot has changed. There are now over 100 characters in Tacticus, and that means over 200 potential abilities to invest in. I should preface this sort of guide is aimed at enabling players to make the most out of their limited resources. More than 3 years into its release, Tacticus remains a grindy game where resource management factors heavily. You're more than welcome to just play your pet faction or whatever else you enjoy. That's great, but this is an early warning that this guide probably isn't for you. As a small thank you for your support, here's a small code to keep you going. It's valid for 2 weeks. As always, a quick shout out to my Patreons for their continued support. I want this guide to be useful to players of all walks of Tacticus, and therefore it is important to set the stage. I want to divide the game into different stages. I spoke to a couple of different people about exactly how to do this, and while opinions differed, broadly speaking, the feeling was that the middle game was defined by the time and space between clearing the normal campaigns and the elite campaigns. Equating that to power level, again as a rough calculation, that means that you're considered an early player until you've hit level 30 and an endgame player after level 50. This framework helps to divide the advice in this video appropriately. There's a lot of useful information in my beginner's campaign video, but to transition that here, I'll summarize a few key points. There are 8 fixed campaigns that you should focus on unlocking and progressing. Completing campaigns unlocks more nodes for you to farm upgrades for more characters, and eventually gets you access to elite campaigns, which give you the best return on energy spent. There are 2 key messages here for the vast majority of campaign characters. First, their usefulness after completing the campaign generally tends to disappear, with a few key exceptions. Snowprint are getting better at reworking these older characters, so all hope is not lost, but generally you're safer in not over-investing. Summoners and summons are king. The AI in Tacticus operates under a simple principle. First, try and kill an enemy if possible. Then, if you're not able to kill an enemy, try and bring an enemy as close to death as possible. Characters tend to have both more health and armor than summons, so this AI coding results in the enemy generally trying to prioritize attacks on your summons. This is great news, especially for campaigns, because it means your characters are safer for longer and you can get away with less investment overall. When we look at the early game, therefore, our initial focus for ability upgrades should focus on 1. Summoners who will carry us through the campaign by taking advantage of enemy AI, and 2. Characters that will hold their value as you progress through the middle and end game. On this slide, I've listed all of the current campaigns and the recommended character and gear levels, a slide that I've updated from my previous beginner's campaign guide video. Now the slide shifts and you can see for each of those campaigns the recommended abilities to invest in. You'll notice some early themes. Most abilities that are highlighted are done so because they create summons. The Imperial campaigns will all have their respective 3 core characters, but in most stages you can bring other Imperials along for the ride, which is why Bellator and his summons are so important. They have this special trait, Gravis Armor, which makes them incredibly good at soaking up enemy hits. Bellator can be used for the Indomitus campaign as well as the Astra Militarum and Black Templar campaigns, effectively getting you triple the value. I would suggest taking this active to roughly level 26 for this stage of the game. Similarly, the Chaos characters can support one another in their campaigns, and with both Abraxas and Archimatos, you shouldn't have too much difficulty there. Beyond that, there are 3 other campaigns that don't overlap. The Orc campaign is much easier by virtue of their rework, and Gulgorts retains a lot of his value through to the middle and end game. The Necrons are probably among the weaker of the core campaign factions, and hopefully due a rework soon. Aleph Null's Scarabs are pretty nice, as is her self-healing and sustain, so even if you don't invest in her active, a highly geared Canoptech Spider will do a lot of heavy lifting. What about the characters that I've not recommended here? Well, it's your game to play as you choose, but I generally wouldn't recommend bringing their abilities past level 12 or 13 just now. You can always circle back and level these abilities later on, but campaign progress, which is probably the main focus point for early game players, is generally dictated more by gear levels rather than ability levels. For this initial section, I've just focused on the starter characters, but players will join at different stages of the game and may have some random luck in pulling a rarer character. I've listed a few options here with suggestions about ability levels to complement the core characters, should Lady Luck or Lord Credit Card smile on you. For the sake of being consistent with our self-imposed definitions, the middle game is the period in the game when you are moving to complete all of the elite campaigns. The reason that the campaigns, and in particular the elite campaigns, are of such importance is because there is a hierarchy to campaigns. Upgrades, the stuff that we use to upgrade our characters, are found within campaigns at varying drop rates, with elite campaigns offering the best stuff at the best rate. Alongside the extended campaign focus, as a middle game player your roster is now widening, and you'll be thinking about the other game modes with a bit more perspective. Guild raids are probably the big one, as an omnipresent game mode with pretty good rewards when you can get coordinated within a guild. Horde mode, the term used to describe combat in wave-based modes like legendary release events and survival, are also more rewarding when your roster widens. Guild war is accessible but probably still more of an endgame concept. With those in mind, we can look at some mid-game ability priorities. You won't have all the characters unlocked, and people's rosters will start to look very different by this stage. For campaigns, I don't really think you need to deviate from the characters mentioned in the previous section. Once more, the majority of progress will be achieved through gear level rather than ability level. I've adjusted most of the previous abilities upwards, reflecting the higher requirements and strength of summons for this content. You won't regret taking these summoner abilities up, as they will be good for Horde mode and War too, which I'll come to later. Doom is good for raids. Burchard's passive is fine, but probably not necessary for elite campaigns, and I would lean on your other Imperial characters. At some point you will need to level up the 3 Astra Militarum, as there are 3 character stages on the Fall of Cadia Mirror Elite, and you will not be able to access the nodes past them otherwise. As a middle game player, the other game modes will start to open up to you a bit more. I think the most important is guild raids by a significant margin. Guild raids are active for 13 out of 14 days. That means that you're basically going to be raiding every single day you play the game. On top of that, there is a very small pool of characters that are excellent in this game mode, so you can invest in a few, use them all the time, and get a superb return on time and resource invested, especially compared to other game modes that we'll come to later. At time of recording, I believe there are 2 main raid meta teams, the Mech Team and the Custodes Team, and 2 of what I would call sub-teams, the Psyker Team and the Multi-Hit Team, even though the Psyker Team gets a big boost at Mythic. There is some overlap between the different teams, and I've gone over them in dedicated videos, which I'll link in the video description. Here is a summary slide detailing which teams perform best against the various bosses as a rough guide. This stuff is difficult to get right for everyone, given the variety of rosters and the difficulty in standardizing against boss rarity. My advice for this stage of the game is to pick one main team and build it tall. While the multi-hit team is your natural transition out of the early game, eventually one of your main raid teams will crystallize and replace the multi-hit team. The Custodes team requires a bunch of legendary characters that you likely won't have access to for some time. The idea behind the multi-hit team is to use characters with lots of hits and combine them with damage buffers. On screen are the characters who are part of the best or close to best versions of the team. If you have one of them, then I would suggest pushing their abilities to level 35 or so. If you decide to build a mech team, then these are the options that I would suggest you focus on for this stage of the game. I'll leave this on screen for you to digest for a bit. The main ones I think you want to focus on first for this team are Rose abilities, which do all of the damage, after which you can think about the others. If you decide to build the Custodes team, which I personally really like, recognize that they are gated behind legendaries. These are the abilities to focus on. Both Carrion's and Karn's abilities are the priority from a damage dealer point of view and should be focused on first. If you are fortunate enough to already own Trajan at this stage of the game, then get his passive into play as soon as possible for the damage buff. If you want to build a Psyker team, which is probably weaker at this stage of the game but strong in the mythic stages of the end game, then these are the abilities I would recommend. The team is relatively light on badges and you can focus your efforts on Neurothrope's passive, which does the bulk of the team damage. I haven't spent a huge amount of time explaining those teams or abilities here, but hopefully the aforementioned focused videos provide insight for those who are curious. Horde mode is hopefully a concept familiar to most by now. The term is used to describe survival and legendary release events, where you face waves of enemies, often increasing in difficulty. The rewards for the game modes are great, lots of gold and experience books for survival, and awesome legendary characters for LRE. Technically, Onslaught fits the definition of this game mode, but as you grow, Onslaught becomes much easier in difficulty by comparison. The key traits or characteristics for a good character in Horde mode are as follows: being survivable or tanky, having the ability to create summons, or being able to kill multiple enemies per turn. With that framework established, these are the characters I would recommend building for Horde mode. I've stuck to epic unlock caps here since you are unlikely to have many legendaries as a middle game player. I'll point out my favourites by alliance. For Imperial, I think Isabella's passive is superb for healing and keeping your squad alive in an attrition mode. Tangita is another great one since he overlaps with guild raid modes. For Xenos, I like Snotflogger and Shozo. Snot's grots scale really well, and Sho's drones are amazing in LRE and have raid overlap with the Mech Team. For Chaos, I'm quite high on Archmatos now, thanks to his recurring summons, and putting Angrax in front of a spawn point is something that never really gets old. You're an endgame player once you've completed all of the elite campaigns. The endgame can therefore apply to a huge swathe of players with a lot of variability. From an ability perspective, I think there are basically 3 breakpoints here. Level 50 plus, which says that this ability is insane and a cornerstone of what makes the team work. Level 44, which says that the ability is powerful but not essential to max out, particularly if you are a lower spender. And level 36, which says the ability works absolutely fine at lower investment. If you wanted to put just a few badges and take these abilities to 38 or 40, that would be fine too, but you don't need to go super high with these ones. For each of the raid teams, we're now taking those earlier identified abilities upwards and adding a little bit around the sides. These new abilities don't necessarily do that much damage, but when you're using these characters 1.5 times a day, things start to add up. The main considerations for the multi-hit team are adding that icing to the cake in the form of upgraded passives. I've done the same here for the Mech Team. Tangita's active, which helps you tank the Screamer Killer a little bit, and Galgortz's passive does a bit of extra damage against summons, which is useful for Sarek. To be honest, Helbrecht should probably be on the other side of the dotted line, but I figured there were already enough Imperial characters and abilities there already. We're expanding the Custodes team with some flex slot characters instead of Ragnar. The most attractive options at the moment are Abaddon, Mephiston, and Vitruvius. Of the 3, I think Abaddon is performing the best at the moment, and I'm quite surprised to see the success people have been having with Vitruvius, despite the damage cap on his passive. If you want to build a Psyker team, which is probably a bit weaker until you get the Norn crown, then these are the abilities I would recommend. There are a couple of additions in the form of the Winged Prime and Archimatos, who are only really players if you are lucky enough to unlock the Norn crown. Horde mode becomes a bigger consideration for endgame players too. You want to be pushing deeper into LREs and also in survival, which carries some great rewards if you can full clear the legendary stages. I've updated my recommendations from earlier but also included characters at the legendary tier, which I excluded from the middle game recommendations. The main legendary considerations here are for the Chaos track, with both Ahriman and Abaddon adding significant value. Guild War, in my opinion, is a luxury for the endgame player. Unlike guild raids, the return on investment in your characters here is far poorer. You construct 5-man teams for offense and defense, with attackers having to work through additional hurdles in the form of defensive bonuses and upgrades. I've done video guides on some teams and strategies to use, but I've highlighted a few characters and abilities that I think work particularly well in this game mode. I think the best defenses at the moment are the Death Guard team and the Genestealer cult team. Summons and summoners are great as usual due to how the enemy AI respond. I haven't listed ability levels here as you can use characters at lower rarities in Guild War with the rarity caps. There will be lots of other options as technically you can choose over 200 abilities for Guild War. Guild War tests the width of your roster really well. On this slide I'll just highlight a few of my favourites for each alliance. For Imperial I like Ragnar's active for burst damage and Tangita's passive for summons. Snotflogger and Shozo's passive are my favourites for Xenos, continuing with the summons theme. For Chaos, I'm a big fan of Abaddon's passive, which buffs your Chaos units and Chaos teams really well. The last thing to talk about is Machines of War, which really elevate your teams and gameplay in the later stages of the game. I don't think you should be upgrading their abilities prior to the endgame, and there are only a few abilities that are truly important here. The Forge Fiend's primary I think you'll probably want to take to at least level 44, which is really useful for clearing the extra spawns on fights like against Belisarius' Call. Galatian can be deployed on the battlefield and works with the Mech Team as a summon that is triggered by Tangita, so the higher the better. The Exorcist Battle Tank is also great for the Psyker Team in particular, and the breakpoint for the 20% bonus damage is at level 36 for the primary ability. There's an argument to put some investment into the Biovore, since it is a popular and powerful machine of war. Any damage that it does is essentially free. I'd suggest level 36 for both the primary and secondary, but again, the higher is better. Okay, that was a really long one, but I wanted to do the topic justice. I hope you enjoyed it, and bye for now.